The Voice of Jesus, a sermon of James Denny found in his book, The Way Everlasting, printed in 1911. The text is Matthew 11:28-30. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now there is a benediction in the very sound of these words, of which few that have heard them are quite unconscious. And it becomes the more striking when we observe the setting in which they are placed by the evangelist. Up to the preceding chapter, the story of Jesus' life as a teacher and healer seems to have been one of unbroken success. The multitudes thronged around him, and the word so grew at his hands that he was obliged to share it with the 12 and to send them out to preach and teach in his name. But with the 11th chapter, a turning point is reached, and now almost every incident in the life of Jesus over a considerable period might be headed an offense. In the opening of the chapter, his forerunner John is represented as in doubt about Jesus' messiahship. He asks, "Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another?" Then we see Jesus comparing his contemporaries, the generation which would not listen either to himself or his forerunner. He compares them to willful children who would not play at any kind of game their companions proposed. Neither a wedding nor a funeral would please them. They would not be in earnest about God, whether he came in the austerity of the Baptist or the friendship, the genealogy of the Son of Man. Now, in what immediately follows, we hear Jesus denounce woes upon the cities which had seen all his mighty works and yet had not repented, and face the disconcerting fact that all the better classes, as we would call them today, were against him. The wise and the prudent could see nothing in his message. And yet, while thus repelled on every hand, Jesus is not shaken inwardly. His trust is in the Lord. He shows it by words like this, "Even so, Father, for so it seemed good in thy sight." His confidence that he is empowered for his work and can do for men all that they need to have done remains. He says, "All things have been delivered to me by my Father, and no one knows the Father save the Son, and he to whomsoever the Son wills to reveal him." And above all love, his Father's love remains. Now it's against this background of offense and disappointment that Jesus stretches out his hands again and cries, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Now the people addressed were in the first instance those whose religion has become a burden to them. It's remarkable indeed that this is one of the places where the words burden and yoke are used. We hear Jesus say, "They bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne upon men's shoulders." And Peter joins in the comment, "Ye are putting a yoke on the neck of your disciples, which neither we nor our fathers were able to bear." Religion had become a burden. and an affair of endless commandments and prohibitions, statutes, hundreds of them. They were to be obeyed because they were there, the traditions of the elders. And as Jesus looked around, he saw men crushed, bent, and tottering under the traditional and statutory religion, never getting one step nearer God, nor finding rest and liberty within. And it is to such he cries, "Come unto me. I have the secret of what you are longing for. I can initiate you into the true religion and experience the obedience which is not imposed by statute, but inspired. And there you will find rest for your souls." Are there not still those whose burden is that of a degenerate religion? True religion, the life of God of the soul, is not a burden, but the very reverse. It's not something that we carry. It is properly something which sustains us, which carries us. But how many people there are whose religion is their chief trouble? There are plenty of men and women who get nothing out of their religion. It perplexes and oppresses them. And the reason for this is always the same. Human traditions have gathered around them, and their religion has become identified with tradition. A great mass of things we are to believe because others have believed them, things to do because they're done by the elders. The whole thing becomes a burden and a perplexity. The ways of religion have become conventional, of being good and of doing good, from which we cannot help fearing that the virtue has departed. We are weakened and depressed, overborne by our religion. Now, what are we to say to souls in such a case? Jesus says, "Come unto me." What you need is not religion, but Christ. It's not other people's pieties or creeds or religions that you need. You need a religion of your own, not one kindled in your soul by law. This one will enable you to feel the liberation that comes from experiencing the love of the Lord. Now, how do we come to Jesus? There's no general answer to that question. The peculiarity and the beauty of it is like coming to a person, and that is that everyone does so in their own way. It's not like learning a catechism or mastering a science. It's like forming a friendship, like falling in love. Everyone crosses the line of Jesus in his own angle, and in all true religion there is an original experience which in some way is our own. And no one can tell when that happens, how human relations to which we will owe our happiness and joy is something that comes to us unexpectedly, in insignificant ways, through a look, an attitude, a gesture, the tone of a voice. There is something incalculably incommensurate in a real contact of the soul with one another, and that is the case with Jesus. The one certainty in this case is that we come to Jesus in some kind of obedience, in an act rather than a belief. Take my yoke upon you. Now, no intellectual difficulties are ever supposed in the gospel. There are no intellectual requirements, but there is always something to do or to bear. What it is, we must find out for ourselves in Jesus' presence. But as we do it, the true religion will rise up within us, assured, emancipating, full of a deep peace and joy. Though the idea of a yoke seems to be irksome, Jesus says, "My yoke is easy. It is made for you. My feet," the psalmist says, "always move quicker of themselves when I catch sight of the hills." And as Jesus breathes his own spirit into us, obedience is not a crushing burden that we bear. It is the uprising in us of gratitude and devotion in which our souls find rest. Now, if a degenerate religion is the burden of some people, that of others is that they have no religion at all. Their life is empty and futile. Life is a burden to them because there's nothing in it. It has no chief end, no satisfying result, no fruit that abides. Day by day it goes on, and year by year always heavier and heavier as the emptiness is realized. How many people there are who are burdened by this vain life which has no inner life, no inner purpose, no freedom of its own. How many of these people have rebelled against conventional religion and have not got past the stage of mere rebellion? But more commonly than we think, they represent what is another great tradition in human life, the tradition of self-will. Promising as it seems at first when we begin this way of living, all experience goes to show there's nothing so fatiguing and oppressive, it never gives rest to the soul. Has the Lord Jesus anything to say to those who are sighing under this burden? Yes, even to those who live this empty, disappointing life. He cries, "Come to me." Empty and worthless as your life is, it may still be redeemed. It may be filled with the fullness of God. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. What does that imply? Jesus is saying, do one single thing, which is an act of obedience to God and to your Lord. Do one single thing which his example inspires in you, because his yoke is a yoke which he bears, not one the Father or God imposes, and you'll be let into the secret. Once you get into this living relationship with Jesus, this contact with him, no matter how insignificant the point of contact might appear, a process will begin and continue and not stop until the heart and the mind have gathered all things unto itself. It is the same in the spiritual world. The emptiest life only needs to establish this kind of obedient, loving communication with Jesus by putting his yoke on to be launched on a career of boundless satisfaction and peace. Now, there are additional burdens still than that of a degenerate religion or an empty life, the burden of a bad conscience, and we want to talk about this in our next sermon.